Hi, it's your real estate geek, Andrew Finney here. So today we're back with the Home Buying Guide, 22 Steps for Your Success, episode number 3, How Much Home Can I Afford? Now, I know that's a very popular question, and many questions that get asked in the home buying process are all great questions. So right now, after determining that you're ready to buy as opposed to continue renting, we've taken a look at your credit score. Now the next question is, how much home can I afford? It's important, number one, to think about the fact that even if you're renting right now, whatever amount your rent is doesn't necessarily correlate to how much home you can realistically afford. And there's a few different reasons for that, and we'll get back to that in a moment. So perhaps one of the best things that come to mind was whenever a family of 6 had contacted me in the summer of 2016. Dan and Maria had contacted me online and said, "Hey Andrew, we're moving from out of state and we're looking for our new home in Las Vegas, Nevada. We have a large family. Our parents are both going to live with us. Both sets of parents are going to live with us." And I was like, oh wow, it's already a full house. You got family of 6 and you're adding the parents on top. So now it's become like a family of 10. So I said, sure, Dan, tell me what you and Kim are thinking about. And they said, well, we're thinking that we need a big 2-story home so we have a little bit of privacy from our parents and such. And we would like that home to be around 5,000 square feet. I said, oh, wow, that's a big house. He said, yeah, big family, big house. I said, so great. So tell me where you guys are at in your planning phase beyond identifying that you want to move to Las Vegas and what steps you're taking next to plan on how much home you can afford. And he said, well, you know, we were kind of basing it on how much money we earn, and, you know, our brother had recently bought a home with you, so we just wanted to chat with you and figure out more about how much we can afford before we get over there and get into the process. So I said, okay, sure, that was great. And, you know, one day, Dan contacted me and said, Andrew, you know, I've been thinking about this a lot. You know, you sent me over a few great homes. I asked you to send over to me so that my wife Kim and I can start taking a look at the homes and get a better idea of the area, town, the school systems and stuff like that that are important to us and the community types so that we can find our new home over there. But here's the deal, Andrew. I try to get my mind around how much home can I afford at this point and get my mind around a monthly budget to maintain that home. And I said, sure, Dan, you know, those are great questions. Number one, right off the top, to be absolutely certain how much home you can afford, the best thing is going to be able to contact a local loan officer over here in Las Vegas. And I know a couple of great ones that would be happy to assist you. He said, okay, we could do that, but just between you and I, Andrew, you know, are there any like general rule of thumbs or any considerations that I should have in making up this this future budget plan of ours? And I said, yeah, you know, absolutely, Dan. What you and Kim are going to want to do is you're going to take a look at your annual income. I mean, the general rule of thumb of years past is take your annual income and multiply it by 3. So if your annual family income was $120,000, let's say that Dan earned $60,000 and Kim earned $60,000, so your annual adjusted income for your household would be $120,000. So by the general rule of thumb, you would multiply that by 3, which is $360,000. He said, okay, but that's not finding us the home that we want. We're not able to find it at that price point. What we're looking for is like $500,000, $600,000 in Las Vegas. I said, yes, you're absolutely right. Well, that was a great thought process and still is the ideal number out there right now for families to take into consideration when it comes to budgeting for their new home. It's important to just go ahead and adjust for the current times. So in conversation with the lenders that I work with frequently, the way he had chatted about it and said that a family that has, like we said, Kim had $60,000 a year and Dan has $60,000 a year, take that number, multiply it by 4 to 5, and that'll give you your new adjusted number. So going back to the $120,000 number, if they multiplied by 4, it'd be a $408,000 home, and if they multiplied by 5, it'd be a $600,000 home. He says, Andrew, now we're talking and we're ready now because we found the perfect home. We can fly out there and be there tomorrow. Well, I said, had you considered, you know, you're going to have a down payment on that home, and of course we still need to get your loan pre-approval letter, but have you considered that you're going to have a down payment on that home, and have you considered what financing type that you'll be looking at? Because right out of the gate, you know, $600,000 here in Las Vegas exceeds our FHA loan limit amount, which is $287,500 in Clark County. He said, oh no, I wasn't aware of that. You know, I live in Hawaii, and my wife Kim and I were talking about how FHA is much higher than that here, and we could afford it. And I said, absolutely right. State to state, those FHA loan limits are different by county by county. So he said, oh, okay, I didn't know that. I said, okay, great. So another thing to consider with how much home you can afford is, in addition to the down payment amount and what type of loan program you're going to be using, is have you considered your closing costs? There's buyer closing costs with a loan. He said, no, I haven't heard about that before. I said, okay. Well, as a general rule of thumb, you want to factor for about 3% of a sales price. So let's take your high number so we can just factor off the high and work our way back if we need to. He said, sure. I said, take your $600,000 home that you want and multiply that number by 3. What do you get? And of course, Dan says, you know, $18,000, Andrew. I said, that's right. So you're going to need your down payment plus $18,000 for your buyer closing costs. He said, oh, wow, okay, well, we're ready for that. I said, okay, great. So then now let's look at the next logical thing. You know, I said, you know, the families that I have the opportunity to work with, I like to make sure they have all the information available to them to make great decisions that are going to be best for them and their family based upon their needs and what they're looking for. He said, okay, sure, what's up? I said, now, have you and Kim given consideration of how much money it's going to cost you every single month to maintain that 5,000 square foot home? He said, how do you mean? I said, well, you know, you're going to have obviously your mortgage payment, and in your mortgage payment, you're going to be looking at 4 or 5 different things. Since this is an HOA community and a gated community, you're going to have an HOA fee. He said, okay, we're good with that. I said, okay, well then let's take a look at the principal amount. Let's take a look at your interest rate on your loan, how much the property taxes are going to be, and what your monthly insurance is going to be on your home, plus your HOA fee. And he said, okay, well, how much is that generally? I said, well, you could be looking at maybe somewhere between a $2,600 to $3,400 mortgage amount, depending on what your down payment amount is that you actually put on your down payment towards your mortgage. And he said, okay, well, that's okay. We can work with that. You know, we have a big family, and my wife and I have great jobs, and we can do that. I said, all right, absolutely. Now, I said, now, an interesting thing that I've noticed here in Las Vegas and where you live, it may be a little bit different. And if it is, tell me in the comment section below, because I'm very, very curious, obviously being a real estate geek, exactly how this would work out. So in Las Vegas right now, it's the summer of 2017, right? And I've noticed that if you take a property square footage and you multiply it by 80% to obviously 100%, but normally somewhere between 80 and 90% multiplied by the square footage, and it's going to give you roughly the amount of money every single month that it's going to cost you to maintain that home whenever you're considering your overall whole mortgage balance number that you owe every month on your mortgage note, in addition to your utilities, being your gas, your electric, your sewer, your trash, everything like that. You take all those things considered and maintaining that home, and it's generally about the square footage multiplied by 80% to 90%. Now, if you're watching this right now, you're not in Las Vegas, obviously, right? Just out of curiosity, run a number. And if you own your home, run that number and just see how it works out in your state, and then compare it to how much you actually pay in maintaining your home. So it's essentially maintaining everything but your food and your entertainment and your cars and your car insurance, right? But everything else as a household operating income would be in there. So I'm really dying to know about that. And if you have any updates or any other kind of rule of thumbs, please let us know in the comment section below. Tell us where you're from and tell us what that mathematical equation looks like where you are, so it can help somebody else watching this video, please. So back to Dan and Kim. After we had that conversation, Dan was somber. I mean, it was like a good 60 seconds, so 1 to 2 minutes actually, before he said anything again. And they sounded like, you know, whenever he did, when he came back on, he said, Andrew. I said, yeah, Dan, you okay? He just sounded kind of like he was white as a ghost. And I was like, okay, I hope I didn't scare him, just trying to help him. And he says, Andrew, I think Kim and I need to chat with our parents and our family again. I think we're going to need to revise our criteria, because our goal is to go over there and enjoy our quality of life and be closer to our friends and family, not to be housebroke. I said, you know, Dan, I am so thrilled that you're going to have that conversation with your family, because it's that conversation right there that sometimes people don't think about, or if they do think about it, they don't. I mean, let's face it, until you buy your home and you're in that new home, you don't exactly know what your utilities are going to be. So how do you plan for it? How do you plan for all of that? Well, we got to give it some forethought. We got to think about it now, and then kind of come up with a budget, and always estimate that budget a bit high so that whenever time comes and you move into your new home, you're not surprised with the bills and you can afford it comfortably. So, going back to that, there's another thing that whenever we were talking about the general rule of thumb about how much money you can afford on your loan, something that's really interesting to note too, in addition to if you can keep at that annual salary multiplied by 3, essentially 3 years of your income, that's definitely ideal, and it's going to keep you in a really strong and favorable position. At the same time, let's face it, homes are going up in price, and the indicators don't show any signs of slowing down realistically right now. So if you're going to be out there looking for a home right now, you may need to factor that by 4 or by 5. So if you had a $60,000 a year salary, then perhaps it's best to consider a home around $240,000 to $300,000 if that makes sense for you in your current marketplace, or whatever your annual income is multiplied by 4 or 5 essentially. So the other thing to consider about that is that lenders are going to give a lot of scrutiny to what's called a debt-to-income ratio. So what is a debt-to-income ratio? Let's take our same example with that $60,000 a year salary. So if you have a $60,000 a year salary and you divide that by 12 months in a year, that's a $5,000 a month gross income, right? Well, a debt-to-income ratio on a conventional loan is about 45% from what my lenders tell me. So if you take that 45% and you multiply it out, what number do you get? Well, obviously you're going to get around $2,750 or so, right? Or excuse me, not $2,750 or so, but you're going to get around $2,250, right? So with $2,250, then that's your debt to income ratio. Now what happens with that debt to income ratio? That $2,250 has to encompass your mortgage with your principal, interest, taxes, insurance, accounting for an HOA fee, if any, your car notes, your credit card debts, any child support, alimonies, or anything like that, if that's one of your situations. You have to account for all the debts combined, and it cannot exceed that number. Now you say, well, lenders approve this other person for like 55 or 50 or 55%. That could be true, because on a federally insured loan like a VA loan, a FHA loan, or even a USDA loan, their back-end ratios they can go up to is a 55%. So it's important to understand how that debt-to-income ratio applies to you whenever you're considering how much home you can afford. Now, I know this is a lot of math, and if you want to chat with your local loan officer, that's a great place to start. So the reason that all of this is actually coming up is that whenever I had chatted with Dan and Kim, and we helped them buy a home and successfully close on it earlier this year, and they ended up buying about a 3,500 square foot home that cost about $425,000, and they're tickled. They're loving their home. It's more than enough space, and they're quite happy here now, and they're not housebroke, most importantly. But one of the things that came to my mind was I started thinking about all the different families I've helped since I got my real estate license 4 years ago. It's been like just over 100 families at this point in my real estate career that I've had the opportunity to work with. And I was thinking of all those families that had bought a home. And in thinking about them, I was thinking, how many times have the same type of questions resurfaced again and again and again? And it was then that I realized, through no fault of their own, they weren't aware of how much or how to plan and figure out how much home they can afford, nor were they aware of how best to calculate a future monthly budget on a new home when they don't live there yet. So you can see that it's really important to figure out what your monthly budget is going to be. Obviously, you know that, but just do everything that you can and be wary of some of the financial calculators and tools out there. They're a great place to benchmark an estimate, but always estimate a little bit high, because after all, if you plan for more, it's going to cost you more and you're comfortable with that number, and at the end of the day it costs you less, then you're going to be in a much better position. Some things to consider are obviously the factor your mortgage payment, and in factoring your mortgage payment, we're not just talking about your mortgage principal amount. You're talking about your principal, your interest, the taxes, which are property taxes, and your homeowner's insurance. If you have an HOA, you want to plan for that too. And some communities may have master plan association fees too, so you could have two. It's important to factor for that, along with any of the cost of living items, that entertainment, savings, and budgeting that you need to be successful. The whole reason that these videos are being made, the reason I'm making these, are to empower you and give you the knowledge before you get involved. Because let's not go back into like the recession era because we didn't know any better. Hey, with the advent of technology and now this ease of use to making YouTube videos, there's a lot of great content out there. and I really hope that you have found this useful. If you found this video useful, please give me a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel and tell me what you're thinking in the comment section below. In the meantime, I will catch up with you next Tuesday with the Home Buying Guide 22 Steps for Your Success with episode number 4, Planning. Specifically, defining the goals and expectations that you have for your new home, your must-haves, your must-not-haves, and getting real clear on your motivation in buying your home and coming up with a great plan to ensure that you're successful. Thank you so much for watching. And lastly, again, if you haven't already done so, please subscribe. And thank you for watching. Catch up with you next week. Enjoy an amazing day. Thank you.